Chapter 343. In the sky, Li Qingshan sat cross-legged on a cloud. He could feel that the divine talisman of great creation was gathering the power of belief much faster now. If belief was a form of power, then the people in the city below were gradually beginning to believe in an illusory existence. Let's go to the next stop. Li Qingshan patrolled the land. All the missions were carefully selected by him. There were many missions and they covered a wide range. However, they were also extremely simple. Basically, their main goal was to defeat the people of the Jianghu. It was not that he could not complete the more difficult missions. He believed that there were few people at the level of Qi practitioners that he and little and could not defeat. However, the key was to make the characters he wrote stand out. Moreover, once Qi practitioners were involved, there would be all sorts of trouble, and it would be beyond the understanding of mortals. Even if he went to kill the palace master of the Sword Collection Palace right now, the commoners would not know who he was. Cracking down on those local tyrants who bullied men and women and ran amok in the village was what the common people loved to see. Gradually, the image of a young hero was established in the hearts of the commoners. Yes, a young man. Li Qingshan had originally designed him to be a half-grown child. However, the child grew up in the legends. Every time he appeared, he would be different. He would appear in the world in an image that was more in line with the expectations of the people. Discussions broke out under every roof. The patches on the young man's clothes increased and decreased accordingly. The color of his belt would change from red to green. The brush in his right hand remained the same, but his left hand would sometimes hold a flute and sometimes a gourd. His final appearance was the integration of thousands of beliefs and wishes. At the same time, the power of belief gathered by the divine talisman of great creation increased exponentially. The young hero also became more and more realistic and powerful. His eyes even shone with a light no different from a living person's. This made Li Qingshan secretly amazed. The mysteriousness of the school of novels. Of course, he still did not possess the ability to think, so he could not be considered a living person. He could only say some stylized lines like a machine. At crucial times, Li Qingshan had to control him like a puppet. However, Li Qingshan could feel it. What restricted him was no longer the amount of power of belief, but the level of the divine talisman of great creation. The level of the divine talisman of great creation was restricted by the level of Qi refinement. Only by transcending the heavenly tribulation and converting his true Qi into spiritual Qi could he reconstruct the divine talisman of great creation and bestow it with greater power. At that time, he might really be able to communicate with people like a living child. At the top of the tallest tower in the city, Zhao Lingshu stood with his arms crossed. Looking coldly at the back of the tiger riding away, he leaped up and a pair of metal wings spread out from his back. Gliding across the sky, he chased after them. With a whooshing sound, a strong gust of wind blew. It descended from the sky and landed in front of the youth. "Who are you? Why are you blocking my way?" The youth said with an exaggerated expression as if he was acting in a play. Zhao Lingshu said coldly, "Which painter's disciple are you? You dare to imitate others to act chivalrously and help the weak? Those tricks of yours can deceive mortals, but they can't deceive me. Who are you? Why are you blocking my way?" The youth continued to speak with an exaggerated expression as if he was acting in a play. "Do you know who you killed on the Jade Mountain?" Zhao Lingshu raised an eyebrow. He was born in a den of mountain bandits. His father and brothers were all mountain bandits. Due to his talent as a Qi practitioner, the sect master of a large sect renowned throughout the Clear River Prefecture had taken a fancy to him and accepted him as a disciple. After many years of arduous cultivation, he had already reached the 7th layer. He never thought he would return to his hometown in glory only to discover that all of his family had already died to the point where not even ashes remained. "Who are you? Why are you blocking my way?" The youth said with an exaggerated expression as if he was acting in a play again. If Zhao Lingshu had played games before, he would definitely find this scene extremely familiar. There was nothing he could do. Although the youth seemed no different from a real person, even able to use many powerful techniques, he was not human at the end of the day. It was exactly because he had never played games before that Zhao Lingshu flew into a rage. All of the people you killed were my family. I want you dead. Swish. The sword on his back flew out of its sheath, wrapping around the youth's neck like a bolt of lightning and a swimming dragon. Zhao Lingshu had already seen the youth's decapitated appearance. He had not come for revenge on a whim. Instead, he had secretly investigated for a very long time. Although the youth possessed the abilities of a painter, his paintings were only at the level of a 3rd or 4th layer Qi practitioner. There was nothing to fear. Sure enough, the youth only blanked out. He watched the flying sword stab over without reacting at all. Just as he was about to get his revenge, Zhao Lingshu felt a sense of loneliness, as if he had left the world behind. As a cultivator, he was destined to walk a lonely path. Farewell, father. Farewell, brothers. Please protect me in the afterlife. However, the flying sword missed. The youth vanished into thin air, while the huge tiger was compressed into a thin piece of painting, flying into the air. Zhao Lingshu was taken aback. Oi, what's wrong with you? A man in green descended from the sky on a white cloud with a child, calling out to Zhao Lingshu. Li Qingshan had just diverted his attention to chat with Little and in the sky. When he turned his head, he saw the flying sword flying towards him. He immediately dispersed his power of will and summoned the huge tiger back. Zhao Lingshu said coldly, "So all of this was controlled by you behind the scenes?" Little and had been observing and listening in all directions, talking to Li Qingshan for a while. I was wondering why those dog *T mountain bandits on Mount Yute were so arrogant. So it was you who supported them from behind. Li Qingshan said angrily after understanding the whole story just now. He had some impression of that place, because he had saved more than a dozen women from the bandits' lair. All of them had been toyed with beyond recognition, and some of them had even gone crazy. He had never seen the legendary heroes of the underworld who served justice and enforced justice on behalf of the heavens even once. Mortals are like ants. They can't escape the fate of being toyed with and killed. Since you've admitted it, then die. Zhao Lingshu made a sword sign, and the flying sword flashed towards him. Li Qingshan's aura was only at the 7th layer of the Qi refinement realm, and the child beside him was only a mortal. He had absolute confidence that he could kill them on the spot. Although things were a little unexpected, everything was under his control. Seeing Li Qingshan use his hand to catch his flying sword, he sneered. "Break." Li Qingshan casually caught the flying sword. "I see that you're also like an ant." Zhao Lingshu activated the flying sword repeatedly. The flying sword buzzed incessantly, but it didn't move an inch in Li Qingshan's hand. He was shocked, knowing that he had encountered a powerful opponent, a rare body cultivator. The metal wings on his back spread out, and he soared into the sky. Fortunately, he had this pair of Mahist iron wings bestowed by his master, so he could fly freely in the air. In the blink of an eye, he saw that Li Qingshan was already flying towards him. His speed was even faster than the flying sword. Zhao Lingshu hurriedly retreated as he said, "Why do we have to fight and kill each other for mortals? I've already thought it through. Ever since I stepped onto the path of cultivation, I should cut off these worldly feelings and have nothing to do with them. I still have to thank you for cutting them off for me. I'm Zhao Lingshu. May I know your name?" Diant. Li Qingshan used the wave-treading style and suddenly sped up, arriving in front of Zhao Lingshu in the blink of an eye. His right hand was like a tiger's claw, easily piercing through his protective true qi and piercing through his skin and ribcage. He grabbed his burning heart and pulled it out. This tiger demon steel's heart had a special flavor when used against cultivators. "I can't believe I'm going to die here." Zhao Lingshu's pupils suddenly dilated. "My path of cultivation has just begun." He used the last of his strength to crush the talisman for help. He became a snack for Little but there were a few useful items in his 100 treasures pouch. In particular, the pair of metal wings was rather interesting. As for Zhao Lingshu's request for help, Li Qingshan did not take it to heart at all. After spending a year in the 100 schools of thought, he gained an understanding of all the renowned sects in the Clear River Prefecture. The association was a gang similar to the Iron Fist. He had forgotten whether their leader was a 9th or 10th layer Qi practitioner, but he was definitely not a Foundation establishment cultivator. In the eyes of the people of the Jianghu, they were terrifying leviathans, but in his and little Anne's eyes, they were just a bunch of self-propelled 100 treasures pouches and family buckets. He was only afraid that they would not come. Li Qingshan even considered whether he should wait here and wait for them to deliver themselves to his doorstep. However, who knew whether they would succeed or not? At the end of the day, proper business was still more important. He was in a hurry to go back and go on a date with Han Qiongji. He leapt up and left on a cloud. 2 hours later, an old man arrived in the wilderness and looked around. He was the leader of the association. His cultivation had already reached the 9th layer, approaching the peak of Qi practitioners. If Li Qingshan knew he had arrived so quickly, he would probably regret not waiting a little longer. The master and disciple were connected. The old man could sense that Zhao Lingshu was already done for. He was furious. His most talented disciple had actually died here. All his years of nurturing had gone down the drain. Revenge? Forget it. There were no traces of a battle on the ground. How could he afford to offend someone who could kill Zhao Lingshu silently? A gang like theirs seemed majestic, able to take all the money and beauties in the secular world as they pleased, but in the entire cultivation community, they were truly at the bottom. Whether it was the disciples of sects or the disciples of the 100 schools of thought, none of them could be offended casually. The slightest carelessness could lead to the destruction of their entire sect. He pitied this disciple of his. His ambition was greater than the sky, but his life was thinner than paper. A month later, the divine talisman of great creation shone brightly. The light blurred the inscriptions on it, illuminating his sea of qi like a blue sun. Li Qingshan smiled in satisfaction, but just that was not enough. However, the seeds had already been scattered across the ground. Next, he just had to wait for them to bloom and bear fruit. There were around 3 months left, which should be enough. Li Qingshan stood in front of the bustling Hawkwolf guard and raised his head, gazing at the vice commander's room below the eagle. He smiled resplendently. "Qiongji, I'm here." He actually felt rather excited. After all, this was the first time he had gone on a date in the 18 years since he transmigrated. Little and had taken the 1,000 corpses picture to Ansrava Island, which gave him enough time. On the rippling lake of dragons and snakes, it was a beautiful spring day. A small boat drifted along with the waves. Li Qingshan lay in the cabin leisurely. A beauty sat beside him. Her eyes were gentle, and her valiant appearance was filled with tenderness. Her plump, vermilion lips were alluring. When she opened and closed them a few times, she let out an indistinct, clear voice. "Gu Yenying and I are in danger at the same time. Who are you going to save first?" Chapter 344. Li Qingshan suddenly stood up and shook his head as if he had yet to wake up from the dream just now. He found that to be extremely familiar. "Don't play dumb. Tell me." Han Qiongji's face was bright red as she pinched Li Qingshan's cheek viciously. Compared to the original version, this question was obviously much easier to answer. Li Qingshan said, "Obviously to save you. Even she can't deal with the danger, so what can I do?" Originally, he thought Han Qiongji would be dissatisfied with this clever answer, but he never expected her to smile. "That's more like it." Her slender fingers brushed past his cheek, and he felt a gentle itch. The boat rocked gently, which made his heart ripple. The warm spring breeze lifted up the curtains on the bow of the boat. Her sweet smile deeply infected him. He felt fortunate that he was here. Under his smiling gaze, she suddenly felt like she was rather frivolous. After all, this was only the first time they had gone on a date. However, she also found this sight to be so familiar. She had been anticipating it for a very long time. She was as fiery as fire. If she did not have any feelings for him, she would even ignore a handsome man like Hua Qingzan. However, if she did fall for him, she would erupt like a volcano, unable to control herself. She did not hold herself back, but it still melted away the sturdiness in Li Qingshan's heart. "With just you, you won't be able to touch her even if you have 10 lifetimes, so don't let your imagination run wild like a little flower." Han Qiongji pinched Li Qingshan's nose. She could turn a blind eye to Begonia's charms, but she felt rather powerless against Gu Yenying. Not only was Gu Yenying the great commander of the entire Hawkwolf Guard of the Rui Commandery, but she was also an idol. Hua Qingzan was not the only one. There were basically countless people who were infatuated by her. Even the Marquis of Rui was like that. Not to mention others. Li Qingshan smiled confidently. Just you wait. I'll marry her and make her your sister. Don't even think about it. Who agreed to marry you? Han Qiongji said angrily, her hands gently caressing him. It immediately turned into kneading. Li Qingshan said, you'd better hurry up. If you're too slow, you can only be the younger sister. Han Qiongji suddenly pressed on top of him and grabbed his collar, causing the boat to shake. This was outside the Dragon Snake Grand Array, in the boundless Dragon Snake Lake, hidden and deep within a vast stretch of withered reeds. A clear voice rang out. A few water birds were startled. Li Qingshan, I'm telling you, you have to listen to me from now on. Why? Li Qingshan raised his eyebrows. In this world, there was no such thing as a man giving in to a woman. However, looking at it from this angle, it really was a mountain range, but he didn't know how it felt. Because I'm your senior sister, your senior. Noticing the look in Li Qingshan's eyes, she said, because I'm your senior sister and your senior. Han Qiongji's face was slightly red, but she proudly stuck out her chest. Then I have to work hard to advance and quickly become a commander. Li Qingshan casually held her slender waist. Under the thin spring shirt, it was tight and smooth to the touch. Han Qiongji trembled slightly. She let his hand stop there, leaned down, and threatened fiercely, from now on, you're only allowed to touch me. If you dare to be fickle with me, you'll what? I'll cut you up. Han Qiongji also couldn't help but laugh. Sigh, it's still new. You should at least use it. Li Qingshan's hand conveniently slid down to her perky buttocks. Han Qiongji jumped up. Her face was red at first, but she suddenly laughed out loud. She touched Li Qingshan's head and said, so you're still. How pitiful. If you perform well, I'll take pity on you in the future and let you have a taste of being a woman. She regained her previous boldness and looked at Li Qingshan as if she was looking at something in her bag, her face full of satisfaction. Sometimes, she would suddenly remember that he was still a few years younger than her. Of course, for a cultivator who was easily hundreds of years old, this gap of a few years was not a huge chasm. However, she would often forget this because the feeling he gave her was always mature and calm, so she was the younger one. Li Qingshan rolled his eyes. Then I'll have to trouble the experienced big sister Han to teach this little brother a few moves. You're talking nonsense, of course I'm also. Han Qiongji said angrily. Also what? Li Qingshan snickered. Only then did Han Qiongji know that he was teasing her. She poked his forehead heavily. You'll know in the future. Li Qingshan looked her up and down. His gaze seemed to penetrate her clothes and take in all of her exquisite and delicate body. He was imagining the future. Han Qiongji adjusted her figure slightly unnaturally. In the past, if a man dared to look at her like this, she would inevitably roar, if you keep looking, I'll dig out your eyes. Most of the time, this was not just for show. Regardless of whether it was the military or the legalists, they would not teach their disciples to be soft-hearted. Li Qingshan suddenly shook his head. He opened the cabin door and walked out. He looked at the boundless reeds and said, I want to have many wives and concubines. I want to have all the beauties in the world as my wife. How can I stop here? You still dare to say it? Han Qiongji pounced and firmly hooked her arms around his neck. However, with her physical strength, it was really difficult for Li Qingshan to feel the slightest pressure. It was more like she was hanging on his body. Instead, her full breasts pressed tightly against his back made him feel a wave of pleasure. He only smiled and said, These are all from the bottom of my heart. You just bully me because I like you. You're only with me because you want to take advantage of me. Han Qiongji suddenly let go of him and retreated to the side. Li Qingshan turned around and saw that her eyes were already red. She was glaring at him and he smiled slightly. Indeed, looking at her rude and innocent appearance, he could not help but want to bully her a little. He went forward and wrapped his arms around her waist, saying gently, "Xiongji." What? Although his tone was fierce, his heart softened. "Nothing. I just feel that you're becoming more and more adorable. Do you think that because of this, I'll? Han Xiongji's pretty face turned red, but her resentment had already disappeared without a trace. "Just having you is enough." These were Li Qingshan's heartfelt words. Although he said that he wanted to have all the beauties in the world as his wife, when she was by his side, she had already attracted all his attention. Yes, she did have this charm. Moreover, everyone's time and energy were limited. He had to accompany little and cultivate and learn alchemy. Even if he had 3,000 cups of water, he did not have the time to drink it. Could it be that he would waste all his precious time in the land of tenderness? The things he wanted to do. There was still a lot more. Han Xiongji's eyes became misty, and her heart was filled with boundless joy. So this was what it felt like when two people were in love with each other. Just a word was enough to make one's heart bloom with joy. She, who had once been dismissive of this kind of lingering love, now deeply experienced the beauty of it. She raised her head and said, "Remember what you said." "I said it. It's getting late. I'm going to learn alchemy. You should also return to the school of legalism to handle your affairs." With absolute willpower, Li Qingshan let go of her waist and took a step back, leaving her warm and moving body. "Are you going to find Xian?" Han Xiongji could not help but imagine the way they interacted with each other. Was it the way they were just now? Plus, there was a reluctance to part. She immediately felt strange. Yes, learning alchemy and trusting your own man is a woman's duty. Li Qingshan ruffled her hair. Although he wanted to be intimate with her here for a day, he was afraid that it would lower Han Anjuan's evaluation of him. Since he wanted to be with her, this was the thought of his future father-in-law. He had no choice but to consider it. After listening to his explanation, Han Xiongji felt a wave of warmth and peace in her heart. She bit her lip and tacitly agreed with his words about men and women. She was not a fussy woman in the first place. It was just that this was her first time in love. She had lost her sense of normality. "Okay, you go. I'll go to Cloud Wisp Island tonight to find you." A man and a woman alone together at night. That's not very good. Li Qingshan understood that the views of this world tended to lean towards the conservative side at the end of the day. If they were both commoners and married privately, no one would say anything. However, Han Xiongji was the young miss of an aristocratic clan after all. Although she was usually carefree, she still cared about her reputation. "What's not good about it?" "It's settled then," Han Xiongji said and stepped onto the bow of the boat. She took a step ahead of Li Qingshan and soared into the sky. The boat rocked for a while. Only then did Li Qingshan understand. She was afraid that he and Xian, a man and a woman, would be together at night. It was rare that she could come up with this kind of scheme. As expected, palace dramas were not a lie. If he really had 3 wives and 4 concubines, it would probably cause him to worry to death. What was this scheme called? Feeding the tiger with one's own body? Li Qingshan couldn't help but look forward to it. He put the exquisite boat into his 100 treasures pouch and soared into the sky. Benevolence Island, in Xian's alchemy room, a huge alchemy cauldron was located in the center. It was shaped like 3 celestial cranes with their wings spread out to embrace each other. It was called the 3 Cranes Cauldron. It was snow-white in color and looked elegant and delicate, just like her. Xian was dressed in white and sat in front of the cauldron. Her beautiful temples hung high, and a few strands of fine black hair hung down. She looked simple and elegant, bringing out the best in this alchemy cauldron. As soon as she saw Li Qingshan, she revealed her usual gentle smile. "Your face is full of spring, and the stars of the red phoenix are moving. Qingshan, are you pregnant?" Li Qingshan sat down on the praying mat next to her and said with a serious expression, "That's right. Xian, from now on, don't tease me anymore. It's impossible for us to be together. Just focus on teaching me alchemy." Xian let out a meow sound. She was mimicking a cat in love. She tilted her head to her shoulder and looked at Li Qingshan from the corner of her eyes. Her eyes were like silk, and it was enough to captivate his soul. She was simply maliciously destroying the elegant image that she had created normally. However, it was filled with a different kind of allure. Don't even think about it. Li Qingshan rolled his eyes. After getting to know her a few times, this woman's jokes had become more and more shameless. However, he couldn't deny that it was extremely touching. Ru Exin frowned and said resentfully, "Li Lang, you really forget the old when you have a new person." She shook her body. So much. I feel like I've suffered a loss. Forget it, the jokes will end here. Today, I'll talk about alchemy using civil and martial fire. The effects of the spiritual herbs, the control of the pill cauldron, and the control of the time passed through her vermilion lips. It allowed Li Qingshan to understand that alchemy was actually so particular. Sometimes, the effects of a pill would be worlds apart just by a moment or two. During this period, there was no lack of jesting. The biggest advantage of learning from her was that he would never feel bored. However, there would no longer be any physical contact. It wasn't that Li Qingshan had turned over a new leaf and decided to be a good man who didn't cheat. Instead, it was Ru Exin who said with a smile, "If you dare to touch me again, I'll tell Miss Han." "How do you know it's her?" Li Qingshan was stunned for a moment. "Other than her, who would like a man like you? You're not elegant, not handsome, and not honest. You're only good at fighting. That's barely a good point." Li Qingshan raised his index finger and shook it gently. "Ruexen, oh Ruexen. You can't say that the grapes are sour when you can't eat them. Huh? Moreover, fighting is where the soul of a man lies. Don't you also stare when I fight? Huh? There's no need to say more. I understand. I'm sorry that I've let you down. Can only—" Ru Exin interrupted with a roar. "You think too highly of yourself. You better stop before you go too far." Li Qingshan laughed out loud. Ru Exin first put on a straight face. Then she also laughed out loud. It wasn't that there weren't any men who could talk and laugh with her. However, there was only one who could be strong without desire. Just like the joke just now. This could only be done with him. Intentionally or unintentionally, was he trying to test her? The conclusion was that he was indeed a stubborn man. Once he decided on something, he would do it regardless of the consequences. On the contrary, if he decided on something that couldn't be done, he would do it without any hesitation. It could be said that he could take it up and let it go at will. Such a man was as hot as fire when he was aroused. But when he was cold, he was also quite terrifying. This was where his charm lay. "You are indeed very special." Alchemy, alchemy. At dusk, Li Qingshan's heart skipped a beat. He pushed open the door of the pill room and saw Han Qiongji wandering by the lake not far away. "Qiongji, why are you here?" "Nothing, I just came to see you," Han Qiongji said hurriedly. But when she saw Li Qingshan's smile, which seemed to see through her, she felt a little helpless. Ru Exin walked out and said with a smile, "Let's stop here for today." She didn't do anything else, which made Li Qingshan sigh in relief. They returned to Cloud Wisp Island together. They found that many places had been cultivated and planted with various crops. Lu Chuanfeng rushed out of the room and asked, "Qingshan, how is it?" When he heard that Li Qingshan had returned, he specially waited here. When he saw Han Qiongji, he was startled. Han Qiongji." Li Qingshan said, "What's wrong?" It turned out that the erotic novels that Lu Chuanfeng wrote in the past were not only looked down upon by men, but also by Han Qiongji, who was a woman. She once scolded him in public in the building. Since then, Lu Chuanfeng would avoid her whenever he saw her. Now, enemies often crossed each other's path. "Patriarch Lu, long time no see." Han Qiongji casually bowed to him. In any case, she had to give Li Qingshan some face. Lu Chuanfeng looked back and forth between the two of them. He suddenly pulled Li Qingshan to the side. "You too?" He clenched his fists and wagged his thumbs. Li Qingshan nodded, "Yes." Lu Chuanfeng patted Li Qingshan's shoulder, showing a look of admiration. He originally thought that it was just a rumor, but he didn't expect it to be true. This Han Qiongji's appearance, figure, cultivation, and family background were all impeccable. However, her temperament was too. When she got angry, she would always be unscrupulous. Ordinary people couldn't stand it. There were also many people who thought that as long as they could get on the Han family ship, it wouldn't be a problem. However, they all failed and humiliated themselves. There were even rumors that she had a special interest in women. Actually, it was spread after Lu Chuanfeng was scolded. No one expected that she would actually fall in love with Li Qingshan. Li Qingshan asked, "What are you back for?" Lu Chuanfeng said, "I'm worried about you. In another 2 or 3 months, it'll be time for you to compete against Chu Danqing, yet you're still in the mood to carry out missions. How's the collection of the power of belief?" "It's all right." Li Qingshan glanced at the divine talisman of great creation again. In just a single day, it had grown by almost a tenth. This was the benefit of the divine talisman. Just by sitting at home, it could constantly grow stronger. As the saying went, 1 spreads to 10, and 10 to 100. The effects of publicity had multiplied. The seeds he had planted had already begun to sprout. Of course, there would definitely be a limit to this growth. It was restricted by the region of the Clear River Prefecture, but the benefits were long-lasting. It would not stop for the next century at the very least. "Are you confident you can definitely win?" "I can't say I'm certain, but I never fight a battle unprepared." "I don't have to worry if you put it that way. We definitely can't hand Cloud Wisp Island to outsiders." "All right, did you get that disciple of the School of Agriculture called Li Long to use our land?" Li Qingshan said, "Yeah, that's fine. Don't worry, you'll get a share of the benefits." It's fine. As long as you can win this battle, it's fine even if you chop down all the bamboo on the island." In the past, Lu Chuanfeng had thought of something like that too, but back then, no one was bold enough to get close to the School of Novels. A few disciples of the School of Agriculture had thought about it in the past, but Earth Elder Huang told them off indifferently when they returned, "Just plant your own piece of land first." Ever since then, none of the disciples of the School of Agriculture were bold enough to mention this. Only a new disciple like Li Long had no idea what was going on. Perhaps it was because the reputation of the School of Novels had changed greatly, or perhaps it was because of Li Long's hard work, but he had gained Earth Elder Huang's approval and was certain that he had already planted his own piece of land. Thus, he did not encounter any obstructions. He asked for the help of his fellow disciples he was familiar with, and very quickly, the land was planted. "Is there anything else?" Li Qingshan said impatiently. "A world of 2 with a vulgar middle-aged man. What was he thinking?" Lu Chuanfeng glanced at Han Qiongji again and muttered, "With a woman, he forgot about his master." After Lu Chuanfeng left, Han Qiongji asked, "You haven't done the same as him, have you?" Li Qingshan asked, "What's the same?" "I heard that he used the power of wishes to materialize the woman from the book and then did that kind of thing." "What a pervert," Han Qiongji said with a look of disgust. "Of course not. The level of my divine talisman of great creation is too low right now, so the person I materialize isn't real. There's no point in doing that kind of thing. I'll think about it after I reach foundation establishment." Li Qingshan said as he pondered. Looking at Han Qiongji's unfriendly expression, he smiled and said, "Let's have some fun." However, if he was really like a real person, wouldn't that mean that many of his ambitions from his previous life could be realized? A portable harem. This kind of temptation was really hard to resist. This couldn't be considered a betrayal, right? It was inevitable for men to have their own little secrets. Han Qiongji said, "I'm not joking with you. If I find out, I'll cut." "Stop." Li Qingshan turned to look into the depths of the bamboo forest. "What are you standing there for? Come over." It was only then that Han Qiongji realized that Little and was standing silently in the forest not far away. Under the moonlight, he looked like a delicate jade peck. His expressionless face had a hint of terror. Little and walked over and asked curiously, "What did you cut?" Li Qingshan said, "Watermelon." Han Qiongji knew that this child was extremely important to Li Qingshan. Moreover, with his talent and strength, he couldn't be ignored. He couldn't ignore her, so he tried to be as kind as possible and greeted her. Little and glanced at Li Qingshan. Under his signal, he called her Sister Han. Li Qingshan didn't think much of the two-person world becoming a three-person world. Of these two, one was his family, and the other would become his family in the future. It wasn't a bad thing to get close to each other. Han Qiongji, on the other hand, felt very uncomfortable. This child was really too strange. She also tried to get close to him. But the child's eyes were always as cold as water, like a delicate puppet. Only when he talked to Li Qingshan would he suddenly come to life and have a trace of vitality. It was strange that Li Qingshan didn't feel strange about it at all. As the night deepened, Han Qiongji had to say goodbye. She felt that tonight was not as beautiful as she had imagined in the afternoon. Passing through the secluded bamboo forest path, Li Qingshan sent her to the lake and said, "Little Anne's temperament is not very close. Please don't take it to heart." Han Qiongji said disappointedly, "I don't care about her opinion, but I always feel that I am an outsider between you two." Every exchange of eyes seemed to hide a secret signal that outsiders couldn't understand, but the two of them were inseparable. Li Qingshan said with a smile, "We didn't become like this at first sight. We have experienced a lot." He gently hugged her and patted her back comfortingly. "From now on, we will be like this in the future." Han Qiongji made a sound of "n" and said with a smile, "It's good that she is here. You can't just take advantage of her." "Is taking advantage of my own woman?" Just as Xian said, from a certain point of view, he was indeed a stubborn person. If he wanted to let go, he would let go. If he wanted to have something, he would hold it tightly in his hands. Han Qiongji also felt this kind of determination from his words. Her heart also calmed down. She bit her lips and put her hand on her chest. "I will work hard." She put her hands behind her back and stepped back. When she stepped on the surface of the lake, a circle of ripples appeared under her feet. She softly said, "See you tomorrow." She lightly turned around and walked away step by step. Her footsteps were light and fast like a child. Looking at her distant figure, Li Qingshan quietly said, "Me too." He sincerely hoped that there would be such a day where he could tell all his secrets to her. When they returned to the bamboo building, Li Qingshan asked, "What do you think of her?" Little An said, "She's worth 200 people." Li Qingshan knocked her head and jokingly scolded, "Is doubling the number of people considered respect? It's too late to regret now." Little An covered her head and pouted, "I don't regret it. How could that woman keep up with his footsteps and accompany him to the 9th heaven?" The spring rain fell continuously on the great military training field. Li Qingshan, who had been invited again, said to the military disciples who had formed a battle formation not far away, "This time, it's impossible for you to win." Han Qiongji stood behind him and waved her fist. "Qingshan, beat them up." This made all the military disciples sad. They felt that their most important position had already fallen before the battle even started. As the school of the military with the strictest management and even forbade their disciples from leaving the island, there were not many female cultivators who were bored enough to come here to watch them abuse themselves. Only Han Qiongji would come here often and admire their efforts. She could talk to them, and she could be said to be the dream lover of the military disciples. Now that their dream was shattered, and their rival in love was right in front of them, they roared angrily and united. Chapter 345. Formation. With a shout, a huge snake raised its head from the formation. Compared to last time, it was much more condensed. Clearly, the military disciples did not waste the past few months. Li Qingshan bowed slightly. Like a large bow being slowly pulled, the invisible string stretched to its limit. At the same time, a flower rose from under his feet. Bang! It was like the sound of a bowstring vibrating. Li Qingshan disappeared and turned into a black shadow. He pierced through the fine curtain of rain and formed a temporary hole. When he was dozens of feet in the air, his speed slowed down. However, he immediately took a step back and crushed an illusory wave. With a bang, the ring-shaped chi blew away the curtain of rain. His figure climbed even higher. As if he was stepping on an invisible ladder, he quickly became a black dot in the gray sky. What was he going to do? Every military disciple had the same question in their mind. Was he going to escape? No, they immediately dispelled this thought. Although Li Qingshan was despicable, he was not a coward. After their victory last time, when they calmed down from their ecstasy, they clearly understood that they should not have been able to win back then without any explanation. They developed even more respect towards Li Qingshan. This guy was a true hero, an opponent worthy of respect. It was no coincidence that he managed to win Senior Sister Han's heart. However, the more it was like this, the more they had to defeat him. They could not bring shame to the military or the Han clan. The huge snake raised its head and flicked its tongue. Behind the formation, Han Tie stood with his hands behind his back. He looked at Han Qiongji from afar. He saw her clenching her fists and looking at the sky. Her face was rosy, her eyes were clear, and her face was radiant. It was as if she had changed into a different person. She now had a hint of feminine beauty. He also looked at the sky. He silently said, "Well done." Ru Exen covered her eyes with her hand and looked into the distance. What a stupid idea. The wind howled. Li Qingshan had already reached the highest point in the sky. He had a panoramic view of the islands of the 100 clans. The scattered islands were like large ships floating on the blue lake. Suddenly he turned around. Heaven and earth flipped in that instant. The gray clouds became a vast expanse of land. Beneath his feet, above his head, and in the blue sky floated green clouds. Then he began another climb. "He's here." It was unknown who shouted, but the crowd raised their heads. With the gray clouds as the background, the small black dot was rapidly growing larger and clearer. It was a blue ball of light. A rapidly spinning ball of water. It tightly wrapped around Li Qingshan, its surface rippling with ripples of turbulence. It formed a suction force that attracted all the drizzle in the air, and the water ball quickly grew larger. Ocean wielding. Vortex form. This was the only defensive move in ocean wielding. Its defensive method differed from the spirit turtle's profound shell. It did not create an indestructible structure. Instead, it was like a vortex, deflecting and nullifying the enemy's attacks. Water, no matter if it wanted to attack or defend, had to move as fast as possible. This move was the same as the wave-treading form. It had an extremely high demand on true qi, but it did not place too much emphasis on the quantity of true qi, which was why Li Qingshan was able to use it. With the help of the wave-treading stance, he continued to accelerate. He was like a blue meteor falling to the ground, falling precisely in the direction of the snake's head. The whistling and rumbling filled everyone's ears. The water ball became extremely large, and its bearing as it fell from the sky was shocking. All the military disciples were fearless. They circulated their true qi as hard as they could and let out a united roar. The snake's head and the water ball collided in an instant, and the water ball collapsed, revealing Li Qingshan in the center. Blue swirls of true qi revolved around him. The snake's head was completely unscathed. It only dimmed slightly and moved away slightly. The true collision occurred in the next moment. Li Qingshan was like a drill, plunging deeply into the snake's head and piercing through it as he spun. Boom! The ground shook and waves of earth swept out in all directions. The huge snake that had been pierced slowly dispersed. Li Qingshan finally smashed into the ground as he wished. However, he felt like he had hit the grayish-yellow sky above his head, making him dizzy. If not for the protection of the true qi whirlpool and the cultivation of the ox demon's third layer, which strengthened his physique to a whole new level, he would have been severely injured by this attack. Li Qingshan stood up shakily and discovered that he was standing in a huge pit. The true qi in his body had been completely depleted, and he had to use his body to face the enemy again. He walked out of the pit and discovered that all the military disciples had fainted. He discovered that all the military disciples had fainted, and none of them could stand up. It turned out that the huge snake formed by the military formation was the fusion of their true qi and wills. The result of being defeated in a direct confrontation was a backlash. The ground shook and waves of earth rose up. All of them fainted. Ru Exen clapped her hands gently. Business is here. Regardless of whether it was the backlash of true qi or the backlash of mental energy, with her medical skills, she would be able to take care of everything smoothly. Li Qingshan stood at the edge of the pit and laughed loudly. Only by defeating all of you like this can it be considered satisfying. Han Qiongji flew over from the high platform and gave Li Qingshan a hug. After spending more than a month together, the two of them had become very close. Li Qingshan, who was dry firewood, was quickly set ablaze by Han Qiongji's fire. This caused the eyes of the 9 seats disciples standing beside Han Tie to turn red. They wished that they could attack right now and challenge Li Qingshan. However, no one was confident that they could win. This guy was simply too strong, unreasonably strong. If Li Qingshan had torn apart the military formation, it would have been easier for them to accept it. However, he had broken through it head-on like this. It was simply unimaginable. Could he still be considered a 7th-layer Qi practitioner? His inconceivably strong physique and inconceivably pure true Qi were combined with his peerlessly exquisite battle skills. Using his innate talent for battle, he had achieved this amazing result. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, no matter how bold Han Qiongji was, she felt her face burning hot. Just now, she was really infatuated with him. She could not help but let go of Li Qingshan. However, she did not expect Li Qingshan to wrap his arms around her slender waist. She could not help but stick to him again. She wanted to resist, but when she saw his bright smile, her heart went numb and she let him do this. Li Qingshan looked around. Wasn't the great wish of the past being fulfilled little by little now? Han Tie said to the 10 seats disciples beside him, "Next time, prepare to fight." Time flew, and in the blink of an eye, it was midsummer. Li Qingshan sat cross-legged in the alchemy room. In front of him was a bronze alchemy furnace. The handle of the furnace was cast in the shape of a dragon and a tiger. This was the most common dragon-tiger furnace among alchemy furnaces. It imitated the shape of a real dragon-tiger furnace and belonged to the standard. This was naturally one of Li Qingshan's many underground collections. Although it was only a middle-grade spirit weapon, its grade was already the highest. The most difficult to forge was the alchemy furnace, followed by the crafting cauldron. If one was forging a flying sword, the speed of the sword was a little slower, a little faster, a little longer, a little shorter, and there was a certain amount of error. However, for alchemy furnaces, the slightest bit of instability and inaccuracy could possibly destroy a furnace of pills. In serious cases, there was even the danger of the furnace exploding. It was an absolute test for a refiner. A good cauldron could greatly increase the success rate of a cultivator who was good at it. It was simply a cornucopia, and its importance was extraordinary. Therefore, the value of a cauldron was extremely high. The value of a middle-grade spirit weapon cauldron was not inferior to a normal top-grade spirit weapon. It could be said that Li Qingshan was very lucky to be able to find a mid-grade spiritual artifact cauldron among over 1,100 treasures pouches. A few days ago, when he was just about to formally begin refining pills, he had seen a high-grade spiritual artifact cauldron in the School of Miscellany. Its price of 5 digits was truly a sight to behold. It would have been fine in the past, but now he had exchanged all his spiritual stones for pills. Even if he converted all his contribution to the Hawkwolf Guard into spiritual stones, he would only be able to reach 3 digits. 4 digits was out of the question. Don't let your thoughts run wild. Look at the cauldron. Ruexian called out. Li Qingshan dismissed his thoughts in a hurry. He had already refined the cauldron of Qi amassing pills for 3 days and 3 nights. If he failed at the very last moment, then it would be a waste. And the spiritual herbs used for refining pills had all come from the 100 schools of thought. He had to use this cauldron of pills to turn in the mission. If he failed, then his 3 digits worth of spiritual stones would shrink to 2 digits. If it were not for the fact that a master alchemist like Ruexian had agreed to keep an eye on him, he would have never been bold enough to accept such a difficult mission. Li Qingshan raised his head in some confusion again. Didn't you say that the outcome is basically set now that we've reached this step? All we need to do is wait for the cauldron to open? Ruexian smiled. Yeah, I just wanted to scold you a little. Li Qingshan wanted to grab her neck again. He had always been a person who did things when he wanted to. He spread his fingers and reached towards her ankle viciously. There was nothing he could do. He was sitting while she was standing. He still had to keep an eye on the cauldron, so he could not grab the top. Ru Exin said, "Don't you dare." Li Qingshan thought for a moment, then retracted his hand. If he grabbed her, this woman would really dare to complain to Qiongji. She was good at everything, but once her jealousy flared up, there would be no reason to reason with her. A while ago, when he went to the School of Miscellany, he was also warmly received by female cultivators. He joked with them a little. Fine, he admitted that there were a few things he said that were a little out of line. As a result, she almost exploded and spent a lot of effort to coax him. If Ru Xian reported him again, then it would really be like a volcano erupting. Actually, even if you grab me, I wouldn't tell her. I'm not that bad. Come, do you want to try? Ru Xian deliberately lifted the hem of her skirt, revealing her slender feet. She took a step towards Li Qingshan. Don't. Li Qingshan glanced at it, unfazed. Ru Xian softly patted Li Qingshan's head. Good boy. Li Qingshan curled his lips and let her be. They were already very good friends. Otherwise, she wouldn't have accompanied him to look after the cauldron for 3 days. Although she asked for 1,000 spirit stones as soon as she opened her mouth, after some joking, she still did it for free. There were a few times when he would have almost failed if she hadn't reminded him in time. After waiting for another 15 minutes, the cauldron flashed and the lid slowly opened. White steam screeched and drowned the two of them. It filled the alchemy room and contained an intoxicating medicinal fragrance. Without waiting for the steam to dissipate, Li Qingshan impatiently walked in front of the cauldron. He saw that all of the medicinal herbs had fused into a white paste at the bottom of the cauldron. There wasn't a single impurity in it, and it was as pure as thick fog. The pill was done. Chapter 346. Li Qingshan put his hand on it and it glowed with a blue light. The white ointment began to twist and turn, finally forming perfectly round pills that fit the specifications. He still couldn't be considered to know how to refine artifacts, but simply changing the shape of an object wasn't a problem for him. Ru Xian personally divided the refined pills into 2 portions, one with 60 pills. She smiled and said, "This is for the mission. Give me your hand." Then she picked up a qi-gathering pill and placed it in Li Qingshan's hand. "This is yours." Li Qingshan looked at the fruits of his labor after not sleeping for 3 days and 3 nights, then raised his head to look at the smiling Ru Xian. He felt a deep malice. She just wanted to see him in a bad mood. The pill refining mission didn't have any additional rewards. It purely depended on the person's pill refining skills. As a pill refining novice, the fact that he didn't lose anything was already thanks to the middle-grade spiritual artifact furnace and Ru Xian. Ru Xian admired Li Qingshan's expression with satisfaction. She felt that these 3 days of hard work had finally paid off. Then she said, "Your skill at separating the ingredients is too poor." He placed his hand on the 60 qi-gathering pills, and a white light appeared. Some of the white ointment was extracted, and 3 more qi-gathering pills were condensed. The remaining pills were exactly the same size, and they met the requirements of the mission, not one bit more. Li Qingshan casually said, "Thanks." He lowered his head and put the 60 pills into the brocade box. As for the 4 qi-gathering pills, he directly threw them into his mouth. Ru Xian had already grown accustomed to this. In a few days' time, it'll be the competition with the School of Painting. School of Miscellany has already set up a bet, so tell me some inside information. Do you think it's better for me to bet on you losing or on you winning? Li Qingshan rolled his eyes at her. Up to you. All right then, I'll bet on you winning. However, if I lose, you'll have to pay for it. However, if I lose, you have to compensate me for my losses. In your dreams. Li Qingshan pushed open the door and got up. In the west, the red glow of the setting sun seemed to be burning as it was reflected in the lake. It was extremely beautiful. Sure enough, Han Qiongji was standing in front of the curtain of multicolored light. She was like an exquisite and beautiful silhouette. When she turned around and saw Li Qingshan, she smiled brightly and quickly walked forward. Before Li Qingshan could open his mouth, Ru Xian smiled and said, "Junior Marshal Sister Han, your man just tried to touch my foot." Watch him closely. Han Xiongji stopped and shot a vicious glance at Li Qingshan. She said in exasperation, "Got it." Li Qingshan's gaze once again fell on Ru Xian's fair and slender neck. He became very serious. Ru Xian raised her hand to protect her neck, pretending to be afraid, but the smile on her face did not change. The boat floated freely on the lake. The sky and water blended into one. Luo Xia and Gu Qi flew together. Han Xiongji sat at the bow of the boat and watched silently. The midsummer night wind fluttered her clothes. Li Qingshan broke the silence. "Don't listen to her nonsense. You know she loves to talk nonsense." Han Xiongji turned around. "You dare say you didn't?" "Absolutely not," Li Qingshan said seriously. Han Xiongji smiled. "I'm not angry, why are you so nervous?" Li Qingshan frowned. "For you. What did you do to Qiongji?" Han Xiongji was stunned. She grabbed his ear and said angrily, "Am I that petty?" Li Qingshan smiled and pulled her into his arms. "Yes, my Qiongji is very broad-minded." His other hand had already landed on her proud breasts. Separated by the thin summer dress, they seemed to tremble in his hand. "Don't move." Han Xiongji grabbed his hand, but let him put it on top of her. After several months of being together, this level of intimacy had already become normal. In her words, she was taking advantage of him because she pitied him. "I'm just curious." Li Qingshan found it strange. No matter how he looked at it, Ru Xian was much more charming than that female cultivator from the school of miscellany a few days ago. Han Xiongji said, "Senior sister Ru Xian is a very proud person." The female disciples of the school of miscellany were all mediocre in talent. Their minds were filled with utilitarianism, and they wanted to find a powerful man to rely on. They weren't worthy of being called cultivators. Ru Xian was different. She was a true cultivator. Li Qingshan said, "Proud? I don't really feel anything." "Because you're even prouder." Han Xiongji propped herself up and wrapped her arms around his neck. She deeply gazed at the man she loved. The closer she got to him, the more she was attracted by his charm. She found it strange that she hadn't noticed this the first time they met. Among them, the thing that enchanted her the most was the deep pride hidden in his heart. It was as if no matter how steep the peak, he would always have the determination to climb it. No matter how powerful the enemy, he would always have the courage to challenge them. "I don't feel anything about that." Li Qingshan's hands held her waist. The curves of her body suddenly tightened, delicate and straight. His gaze couldn't help but be attracted by her plump red lips. Even the snow-white ravine that occasionally appeared on her clothes couldn't divert his attention. He couldn't help but raise his head. Han Xiongji tilted her head to avoid him. She tightly hugged him and deeply kissed his ear. She said apologetically, "Not here yet." Although they were already so intimate in many places that it wasn't forbidden, she still refused to accept the more ordinary kisses. Li Qingshan already regarded the woman in his arms as his beloved. Naturally, he could only protect this little hobby of hers. "I want to wait until, when we get married. If I let you kiss me now, I'm afraid I won't be able to hold myself back. I'll give you everything." Han Xiongji was extremely shy as she stuttered. She didn't really care about the matters between a man and a woman. Wasn't it just taking off their clothes and hugging each other to do that? In the past, she carried out missions alone. Out of curiosity, she even climbed over walls and secretly looked around. Other than blushing a little at the beginning, she quickly felt bored. What was the point of moaning and laughing? As a cultivator, she could never be like mortals who indulged in pleasure. Her will that was as tough as steel couldn't be shaken by this. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been able to endure the pain of being sliced into pieces in the Black Lotus Altar Master's formation. Only when it happened to her did she realize it wasn't that simple. Every movement of body contact began to be filled with a different meaning. It made people feel pleasure or tremble because their hearts moved. What else could Li Qingshan say? He hugged her alluring body tightly. "Why don't I just go and ask for your hand in marriage tomorrow? Your father has a good impression of me." It wasn't a melodramatic story of a poor scholar abducting a rich family's young lady, so there wouldn't be too many obstacles. He believed that no one could find fault with the talent, strength, and ambition that he had displayed. This was the reason why he had always chosen to be high profile. If he continued to pretend to be low-key, not only would father-in-law Han not be satisfied, even the 100 schools of thought would be full of criticism. Now, who would dare to say that he wasn't good enough for her? Not so fast. Wait a little longer. Han Xiongji suddenly changed the topic. Little Blossom hasn't come out yet? Li Qingshan said, no. Why did you mention him all of a sudden? Han Xiongji smiled. Just thinking about something from the past? Li Qingshan said, then I'd like to hear about it. Han Xiongji didn't want to say anything at first. However, under Li Qingshan's interrogation, she opened her mouth just now. In the past, when Wasungzan was obsessed with Gu Yenying, Han Xiongji couldn't stand it. She scolded him harshly. She's just a woman. Do you have to be like this? At that time, she didn't think of herself as a woman. However, he said, you just haven't met someone who can move you. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to wait to get married. Li Qingshan lifted her chin. Then, are you in a hurry now? Han Xiongji said stubbornly, not at all. However, I do understand him a little. Although a few months ago, they were still strangers. Now, she couldn't imagine what would happen to her if he wasn't there. Looking at her affectionate eyes, Li Qingshan's heart was already as tender as water. Even Gu Yenying became insignificant. That was just half a fleeting dream. Now, the one in his arms was a real lover. You're much luckier than him. You met me early enough. Han Xiongji said, why don't I think so? You'd better hurry up and cultivate. Let's talk about it when your cultivation surpasses mine. I don't want to marry a man who isn't as good as me. However, at this moment, the posture of the two of them made her words not the slightest bit convincing. Back then, she just said that if his cultivation surpassed hers, she would give him the chance to pursue her. Now, she was in his arms, taking advantage of him. I can't wait. Li Qingshan leaned down. Although he couldn't kiss her lips, other places were fine. He deeply kissed her delicate neck. A smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. He gently licked her. Are you a dog? Han Xiongji's body trembled. She clenched her teeth and said, once her psychological defenses were broken, as a cultivator, her perception of these things was far more delicate and sensitive than that of a mortal. You dare to say your man is a dog? You have to be punished. Li Qingshan lifted his hands and placed them on her soft breasts, kneading them. If it was in the past, she would most likely have cried out in alarm and stopped him from doing anything that went too far. But this time, she still wrapped her arms around his neck and didn't respond at all. Li Qingshan was startled for a moment. The smile on his face widened and the movements of his hands slowed down. His 10 fingers deeply sank into the two soft masses, changing their strange shapes as he pleased. Han Xiongji's breathing quickened. Her eyes were like water, but she still acquiesced to his movements. Li Qingshan found 2 slightly protruding points. He gently pinched them between his fingers and kneaded them. Han Xiongji suddenly hugged him tightly. Li Qingshan stopped moving and gently kissed her neck and stroked her back. After a while, she finally let go of him, allowing him to continue enjoying this wonderful body that no one had ever touched before. It wasn't until Li Qingshan completely imprinted the shape and size in his mind that he reluctantly let go. Before he knew it, the sky had already darkened and stars filled the sky. Han Xiongji's face was flushed red as she coquettishly said, "Are you satisfied now?" She already knew that he wouldn't give up on this place, so she might as well let him have his way this time. "I'm not satisfied." As he spoke, Li Qingshan's hand had already reached under her clothes and touched her delicate skin. Han Xiongji hurriedly grabbed his hand and pointed at his forehead, reprimanding him, "Don't be in such a hurry." At this moment, she seemed like the older one. Actually, even if she gave it to him, it didn't matter. Love between a man and a woman was normal. She didn't care about her chastity like a mortal woman, but she was afraid that if she gave it too easily, he wouldn't cherish it. This little man, she had to stay by her side. In any case, you'll be mine sooner or later. Li Qingshan wasn't in such a hurry. Now you are and always will be. A few days passed by carelessly. In the blink of an eye, it was time for the competition with the painter, Chu Danqing. Chapter 347. In the dark studio, a pillar of light shone down from the skylight. Dust floated within, and the floor was vaguely covered in drawing paper. There were many different shapes and sizes of evil spirits drawn on them. A single glance was enough to make one feel a ferocious aura. However, none of these drawings were complete. It was as if the painter had lost interest in them halfway through. Chu Danqing lay on the drawing paper, his limbs stretched out. His face was pale and he had lost a lot of weight. His eyes were wide open, filled with fear that had yet to dissipate. Danqing, are you ready? An old voice came from outside the door. It was Chu Shidao. Yes, master. Chu Danqing said weakly. He pushed himself up from the floor and walked to the drawing table. It was the only tidy place in the room. All the brushes had been cleaned, and the paint had been arranged neatly. The smell of blood permeated the air. There was a drawing in the middle. Chu Danqing lowered his eyelids, trying his best not to look at the drawing. He rolled up the framed drawing bit by bit before heaving a sigh of relief. It was as if this was not a drawing he had drawn himself, but a beast that would bite. The door was split in half, and dazzling sunlight poured in wildly. Chu Danqing covered his eyes with his hands and gradually saw a blurry figure. He hurriedly bowed and said, Master? Chu Shidao felt a pang of pity when he saw his disciple's appearance. The emerald blood of painting had given him incredible talent, allowing him to draw paintings that far exceeded his cultivation level. However, he had to pay a huge price for it. It could be said that he had truly poured his heart and soul into it. Let's go. Chu Danqing was somewhat at a loss. He was so immersed in the world of the drawing that he had almost forgotten about the competition. Cloud Wisp Island. Chu Danqing suddenly came to his senses. He recalled how he had been drunk by Li Qingshan a few months ago. His face flushed unnaturally. It was after that day. He began painting in seclusion and did not step out of the studio for nearly 6 months. His shameful behavior after drinking must have been spread far and wide. After all, they were enemies. It was inevitable. He hated himself for being too careless. He gripped the scroll in his hand tightly. His anger, humiliation, and depression all merged into the painting. He must teach Li Qingshan a harsh lesson. So embarrassing. After such a long time, I hope everyone has already forgotten about it. Li Qingshan, I will never forgive you. Chu Danqing followed Chu Shidao anxiously. They arrived outside Cloud Wisp Island and saw that many bamboo forests had been cut down. It had become a field or an orchard, and a few agricultural school disciples were currently working on it. What a waste! Chu Shidao snorted. This serene and elegant atmosphere. It was originally suitable for painting, but unfortunately it fell into the hands of a layman like Lu Chuanfeng. Passing through the bamboo forest. When they arrived at the bamboo loft, Lu Changqing sat on the veranda, sipping tea. He raised his cup and nodded with a smile. Lu Chuanfeng and Sun Fubai sat beside him. However, none of these people managed to attract Chu Danqing's attention, as that wretched Li Qingshan strode over. His face brimmed with a radiant, confident smile as he bowed calmly. Master Chu, fellow Chu, you've finally come. Chu Shidao nodded and said to Lu Changqing, Fellow Lu, this isn't the place for the competition. Why did you bring us here? This was the School of Painting's island. He didn't want to see it destroyed. Lu Changqing said, the competition will be held in the School of the military's great martial arts field. However, the School of Novels has some objections to this wager, so we've invited both parties here to discuss it. Chu Danqing glared at Li Qingshan. What, you want to run away? Of course not. Li Qingshan smiled and looked back at Lu Chuanfeng. After obtaining the nominal approval of the School of Novels head, he just now said, I just feel that this competition is very unfair. Chu Danqing said, you are the one who personally agreed to it. How is it unfair? Li Qingshan said frankly, Cloud Wisp Island is the foundation of our School of Novels. If we lose, we'll naturally be left with nothing. If we win, we'll just be defending something that belongs to us in the first place. Grandmaster Chu, do you think this is fair? We only agreed because we had no other choice. If the School of Painting can't come up with a suitable wager, I'll ask Family Head Lu to cancel this competition. Now, it's not something you can cancel just because you want to. What wager do you want? Let's hear it. Chu Shidao stared at Li Qingshan with sparkling eyes. It was true that he had never thought about the wager. In his opinion, the School of Novels was bound to lose. There was no need to set up such a wager at all. Right now, this brat clearly knew that he was going to lose, so he was bluffing and trying to run away. If he insisted on refusing, Lu Chongqing naturally wouldn't help him cancel the competition. He was just afraid that this brat would refuse to participate and say that the School of Painting was forcing him. Since you want a wager, I'll give you one. What's wrong with that? Li Qingshan said, I don't know what I have that can match the value of Cloud Wisp Island. Please tell me, Grandmaster Chu. I'm a poor painter. I don't have anything valuable, just a few small paintings. This painting is my final work. If you find it suitable, then that's fine. If you find it unsuitable, then you can directly admit defeat. Chu Shidao casually took out a painting and said proudly. Lu Chongqing blurted out, Don't tell me it's the Heavenly Maiden Scatters the Blossoms? Throughout his life, Chu Shidao was most skilled at painting beauties. Not only were the beauties he painted lifelike, but their emotions were no different from a real person's as well. However, they did not possess the various flaws of a real person. The beauty in the painting had already surpassed the beauty of the secular world. As a result, there was a saying, even if you have 3,000 beauties, it's still not as good as a painting from Shidao. It was renowned throughout the 9 prefectures of the Rui Commandery. The Heavenly Maiden Scatters the Blossoms was his final work. It was rumored that before he painted it his hair was already gray, but after he finished painting it, his hair turned white overnight. The Marquis of Rui fell in love with it the moment he saw it. He was willing to pay a great price to purchase it, but he said, This is my disciple's wife. I can't give it to anyone else. If someone else said that, they would probably treat it as an excuse, but Chu Shidao had spent his entire life taking a painting as his wife. Even Chu Danqing had to refer to the beauty from the painting as his mistress when he saw her. The Heavenly Maiden Scatters the Blossoms was the heavenly maiden he had left behind for Chu Danqing. When the Marquis of Rui heard that, all he could do was drop the matter. He could not ruin this beautiful story. The scroll unfurled, and all the men present were stunned. The scroll closed up. They were actually unable to recall the Heavenly Maiden's appearance. They only remembered her fluttering clothes, the scattering petals, and the scattering of fragrant pavilions. The fragrance of the flowers lingered clearly in their noses. The Heavenly Maiden's appearance changed and gradually stabilized, but it was the most beautiful appearance in everyone's hearts. Lu Chongqing's thoughts immediately reached back to several decades ago. Back then, he was still a scholar, and it was also the season of falling petals. A young girl swayed on a swing, giggling like silver bells. She was his teacher's youngest daughter. Later on, they were separated, and he had seen all sorts of beauties and kept countless beautiful concubines. Her appearance could not even be described as beautiful, but the feeling she gave him could not be replaced by any beauty. Even she could not. Time slipped by. The feeling back then had already blurred, but when he saw the painting, it suddenly became clear again, as if it was yesterday, as if it was now. A glance back and a smile might not be alluring, but it was enough to win someone's heart. Even if he had to spend thousands or tens of thousands of spiritual stones, it would be worth it. Li Qingshan came to his senses. When he looked at Lu Chuanfeng and Sun Fubai again, they both had the same expression. It was obvious that they were reminiscing about the past. Only Chu Danqing was in a daze. His teacher had long said that he would leave this painting for him to be his wife, but he had never seen it with his own eyes in order not to distract him. He had great expectations in his heart, but now that he saw it, he felt that it was not as moving as the beauties his teacher had painted in the past. Yet, everyone who had seen this painting said it was good, and they were in a daze because it was strange. Chu Shidao was secretly pleased. This painting was the result of his life's work, and it had completely reversed his previous style. In the past, he had painted expectations. When cultivators offered him spiritual stones, he would paint the most beautiful woman in their hearts. This painting, however, was full of memories. It could easily break through a cultivator's firm psychological defenses, touch the softest part of one's heart, and evoke the most beautiful memories. Expectations might change with one's status, but the memories would never fade. Like an old jar of wine, the longer it was kept, the more delicious it became. The one who truly touched you would always be you. Only when he noticed his disciple's expression did Chu Shidao realize that he had miscalculated. 11 years ago, Chu Danqing was merely a little beggar. All he could think about was eating buns. Even eating meat was too extravagant for him. Now, although he was aroused, he was like a blank piece of paper in this aspect. He did not care about memories at all. If Chu Shidao used this thought to paint a plate of steaming white buns, he would really be drooling. "All right, I agree," Li Qingshan said. However, it was not because of his beauty or divine guidance. Instead, it was because the aura emitted by the painting had clearly surpassed the level of a spiritual artifact. However, it could not be called an artifact. In other words, it was not an artifact at all. It was more like a powerful living being sealed in the painting. If he were to duel with this heavenly lady in the painting, even he himself would not be confident of winning. In any case, it was definitely a good thing. Moreover, Li Qingshan was only trying to maximize his benefits. If Chu Shidao was really stingy, he would not have given up on the competition. He was already satisfied with this result. Lu Changqing said, "All right, then let's sign the contract." No one is allowed to go back on their word. On the Great War Island of the militarists, the spectator stands with huge pillars of varying heights were already packed with people. Seeing the arrival of a group of people, discussions immediately broke out. Qingshan, Han Qiongji, who had been waiting for a long time, quickly walked up to him. She wanted to give him a hug, but after looking around, she bit her lip and was too shy to do so. Li Qingshan's eyes lit up. Today, she wore a large red palace dress, and the corners of her dress were embroidered with magnificent peonies. If an ordinary woman wore this dress, it would probably seem too gaudy. Only she had such a confident and flamboyant disposition and such a moving bearing. She seemed like a ball of blazing flames, and her beauty was beyond compare. The noble bearing of a woman from an aristocratic family, which was originally hidden behind her bold and unrestrained habits, was gradually revealed and extremely moving. It seemed that after the date, she had become more and more adept at dressing. Her black hair, which originally only reached her shoulders, had unknowingly draped down her back. Welcome to Immortal Cultivation Audiobooks, your gateway to the mystical world of Xianxia. Dive into legendary tales of martial arts, spiritual growth, and immortal ascension. Here, we bring you full-length English audiobooks of the best Wuxia and Xianxia stories, from young prodigies to ancient sect wars. Perfect for fans of Against the Gods, Martial World, and tales of demons and gods.